local department stores that were open experienced the usual, people bringing back things they got for Christmas. Their reasons varied, but most of us are familiar with the Christmas exchange.
Well, my grandbaby got too many coats and my grandson didn't get any, so I'm exchanging one.
It's too big.
Wrong size.
I buy things too small for my grandchildren.
Didn't fit just right and I didn't want to wear it. My husband thinks I'm smaller than I am, bless his heart. So.
Too small, too tight, too much.
Too much may be right, but many people actually end up spending more money because while they're looking for something to exchange, they find something else they want. That, of course, makes local department stores very happy, even though their sales clerks are swamped with refunds, reorders, and receipts. It is one of the busiest days of the year for them, and they can only hope customers won't exchange their exchange. Balashaw, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Well, it was just almost bolt out of the blue to us, you might say. I had a phone call from the EPA regional office in Dallas, and they just relayed the parts of the cancellation decision to us. And then we got the written document about a week later. So we don't know a whole lot more than what they've sent us, and, you know, just other than making phone calls to different state and governmental agencies trying to find out what they know about it.
Lauren William is 81 years old and full of ambition about life in general. That drive is centered around this woman, Minnie Rollins, his 73-year-old fiancée. And from what we've heard, she's much easier to please these days, ever since Lauren came into her life 6 months ago.
On behalf of Minnie and Willie, I'd like to welcome you all here, and we appreciate your presence here.
I met at the dinner table, and I thought I had offended her. I asked her, I said, can I apologize to you? I said, I think I've offended you. She said, you haven't offended me. The next day I said, will you marry me?
With this ring, I thee wed.
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 Having taken these pledges of your affection and vows of fidelity, I do therefore, by the authority of the laws of this state, sanctioned by divine authority, pronounce you, Lauren William and Minnie Rollins, lawfully married husband and wife, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder.
Amen. Amen. And I kiss the brother.
Kiss the brother.
These two are a refreshing reminder that life should not end until it's really over. Terry Cook, Action 4.
Officials call it the city's worst fatal fire in recent history. The toll, 4 people dead, 2 of them children. The culprit, officials believe, may have been the family Christmas tree. The names of those killed have not been released, but 2 of them were women, ages 19 and 20, and 2 were infants, a boy 2 years old and a 20-month-old girl. 3 others inside the apartment escaped. One, 29-year-old Steve Burton, received 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 60% of his body. He is in critical condition. The other 2 were not injured seriously. A fire station was only 2 blocks away, but by the time firemen could get there, the inside of the apartment was filled with fire and smoke. They found 3 of the bodies by the front door, just a few feet from safety.
The two women who died in the fire were obviously attempting to do that. One woman with the two children were found right at the door. The other woman was found a short distance away. So they were attempting to escape. Whether it was one breath too many or whether it was a flash and intense heat, nobody really knows, but probably that is what occurred.
Late this afternoon, after interviewing the survivors, fire officials say there may have been time to get everyone out safely. One of the survivors told fire officials that there was an attempt by family members to try and put the fire out before the dry Christmas tree flashed, trapping the 4 dead inside. Officials say at least some of the 4 may have survived if they had gotten out immediately. Jeff Fowler, Action 4, Southwest Oklahoma City.
Thank you. Your number, please.
10 years ago, inmate Bobby Battle's lawsuit complained of inmates' rights being violated. Free speech, court access, and equal protection rights were 3 of the items mentioned in the lawsuit. The federal courts agreed with Battles. A few months later, inmates rioted at the state prison in McAllister. 4 people died and over $30 million worth of damage was inflicted. Since then, things have changed in Oklahoma's correction system. A more modern system has come into play. But still, controversial problems developed as late as this summer. Supporters of federal control point to the Connors riot in August and insist there are still serious problems within the system. But state officials disagree and have been pushing for the feds to remove themselves from the case. This evening, federal Judge Frank C. approved the idea.
I think that it's right because we're constitutional, and as long as we're constitutional, I don't think there's any room for federal intervention in this state's business. I think Judge Bohannon giving up the case and then turning it over to another judge who would see it differently has had a great impact on this, but I think we made quite a case in our last hearing.
American Civil Liberties Union officials filed the Battles lawsuit originally, and ACLU attorney Lou Bullock has pledged to appeal Judge C's ruling in whatever court will hear it. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
The Oklahoma City jail is a busy place every day of the year. Suspects are booked into this facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But according to police spokesman Lucian Jones, this weekend the jail was extra crowded.
This weekend we had 40 traffic enforcement officers on the street specifically looking for drunk drivers, whereas on a typical weekend night we would have about 14 to 15 on that roster.
Many of the 41 people arrested DUI on New Year's Eve submitted to a breathalyzer test.
Right here in this chair. Okay. Right with you.
The police agreed to show me exactly how that test is administered. Before the test is given, a bottle with a known quantity of alcohol is sent through the breathalyzer to determine if the machine is operating properly. Then the suspect takes a deep breath and blows into a tube until the machine lights up, signifying the breath sample has been taken.
All right, you need to stand up. As far as this tube comes out of the machine, you're going to have to bend down to it, take a deep breath, blow into the machine until this light comes on. All right, go ahead and have a seat.
Had I really been arrested for driving under the influence today, this breathalyzer test would be optional. I could refuse. But if I did, my driver's license would be revoked for 6 months. At the city jail, Curt DUI, Action 4.
According to the contract we have with the union, we have to give consideration to laid off employees around the country. There are still 50,000 people laid off in GM. These people from Michigan are considered to have no likelihood of recall in the near future, and these are the people that we're targeting for right now.
Deidre Cochran has been a secretary at the Tax Commission since October. Last week, she was one of 129 commission employees who were told they were going to lose their jobs as of January 16th. But today she learned her job is safe. The layoffs have been canceled.
Mr. Wilson called up here and said that I should go down to the training room, and he had us all in the room and told us that we had our jobs back, that the furlough wasn't going to or the RIF wasn't going to take effect. So, well, I was real happy about it.
The reason why the jobs have been saved is a mistake in the way the Commission's budget cuts were figured. For weeks, the Commission has been trying to get the situation rectified. Late yesterday, they finally succeeded.
Well, we were led to believe, and it was our understanding, that we were going to have $2.8 million cut out of our budget of general revenue money. We learned late yesterday that that decision had been changed so that we'd only have about $1.5 million cut out of our general revenue money. That will afford us enough money so that we will not have to lay off the 129 people that we'd already given notice that they'd be terminated.
Getting those employees back couldn't have come at a better time for Nance. It's income tax season, the busiest time of the year for the Commission. The forms are headed out now. And Nance says without those 129 employees, the time needed to process those returns might have tripled. Jeff Fowler, Action 4 at the Tax Commission.
Pleasure to have on our show today a gentleman I've been associated with in broadcasting for quite a number of years. I worked with him at WKY Radio.
Proud of all you've done through these years, and we hope you have many more. One of those candles about to go coming on these last 4 years.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Lee. A great deal. You know, it's a real privilege to have you here because I know how busy you are. Everybody, we have a real treat in store for us now. This young lady comes out of Norman, Oklahoma. She used to work with her brother, Tim Sullivan.
We're not refusing anyone because we're in the business to protect the public, but certainly we have been caught with the budget crunch with the state funds, and for this reason we have a sign advising the people that we do have a problem, and we're trying to recoup with a $3 donation the cost of the clinic.
You should have no reaction to this other than your arm may be a little sore, and if it is, it's sore.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Is that it? Thank you.
You know, this problem of chemical dependency is probably the biggest single medical problem in our country today. Any type of chemical dependency does something negative to your body, and it's frequently devastating. Well, this week we're going to talk about some of the commonly abused families of drugs. One such family of drugs is the amphetamines.
Amphetamines are speed. They cause a sympathetic stimulation in the body, and that gives you a feeling of euphoria, gives you a feeling of mental alertness. It gives you a sensation of power and the thought that you can do things that you may not normally think you can do.
Now, the bottom line with amphetamines, especially the ones that you inject, is that sooner or later your tolerance is going to build up, and pretty soon you're going to need more and more to get the same effect. Now, these folks may stay awake 5 or 6 days in one run. But long toward the 6th day, they begin to cave in, be irrational and paranoid.
And that's when they sleep, and they go on what's called an amphetamine crash. And they'll sleep for 2 days, sometimes 3 days, wake up, will be depressed, and if there are no amphetamines available to them at that stage, that's when they become extremely suicidal.
Now, to make matters worse, if these amphetamines are bought off the street, the buyer really doesn't know what he's getting. Not to mention the fact that you're going to be losing a lot of sleep, critical rest your body needs, probably get malnourished, and then you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of new infections and diseases. Besides that, amphetamines have a big psychological dependence, and that's a tough habit to break. And to support that kind of habit, you can get into a whole set of other problems. I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, one of the most commonly abused families of drugs today are the barbiturates. Now, what is a barbiturate? What does it do to you? Well, in the street language, they're called downers.
You need more and more and more of the downer in order to get the same effect. And the lethal dose gets very close to the dose that you need for its effect.
Now, in recent years, barbiturate abuse has really emerged in our junior high and high schools.
They want to use a downer so they can mellow out, decrease their inhibitions, and, quote, cruise and low ride. And when you combine that with alcohol, the effects to the person who's using them are very euphoric.
Now, when you compound the effect of a drug that decreases your respiratory center, like barbiturates or downers, with alcohol, then you really increase your chance for having a respiratory arrest. That means stopping breathing and dying. And unfortunately, one of the classic examples of alcohol and barbiturate abuse occurs at these big concerts.
And the basic problem is you get a young kid, 14, 15 years old, who'll eat several downers, either Mandrex or Quaaludes or 714s or Barbiturate, drink it down with some alcohol, and then get overheated and standing up in the crowd, squeezed in the front, out towards the stage, and they lose consciousness.
Now, don't jump to the conclusion that young people are the only abusers of barbiturates. Drug abuse is rampant throughout society, at all ages, socioeconomic groups, and classes. It's a big problem, and I hope you'll look at it. I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, some folks may think that drug abuse is a new problem. Well, opiate abuse has been going on since around 5000 BC. Now, opiates, like morphine, codeine, and the synthetics like Demerol, are great painkillers when used appropriately. When abused, they're dangerous, and they just give you a temporary high. One of the most commonly used illegal opiates today is heroin.
And opiates, you get total physical dependence. That is, after you're doing them for 3 days, if you try to stop, your body is craving it, and you're actually withdrawing. Sweating, chills, abdominal cramps, the whole routine.
Now, in general, withdrawal from an opiate doesn't kill a person. But getting the opiate addict to withdraw is another very difficult problem.
You can go years. You can have families of opiate abusers, of heroin abusers. You can go 10, 15 years with utilizing these drugs and depending on them and spending a fortune.
One of the huge problems with this kind of addiction is that the person that buys it, say heroin off the street, really doesn't know what he's getting. There are lots of other chemicals that can be and are mixed with it.
And as you know, several prominent people have recently died inadvertently, not on purpose, but inadvertently, from overdosing from that type of situation. And it's very easy to overdose in that type of situation.
Now, not everyone who overdoses themselves is making a conscious attempt to kill themselves. But the fact is that any kind of drug abuse, be it alcohol, cocaine, amphetamines, barbiturate, or anything else, is just one facet of a much bigger destructive problem, not only for the individual user, but for the family that's involved as well. And for successful approaches to therapy to be achieved, the family and the individual must recognize that they all share a part in it, and they all have to share in the therapy. But there's hope and real success if you want to. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
For years now, long-distance fees have subsidized local monthly rates. But now, with divestiture a reality, the reverse is true. The FCC has decided to charge users an access fee on their monthly bill to subsidize for the long-distance system. The FCC plan is scheduled to take effect April 4th, and it will affect you like this. The first year, 1984, residential customers will notice a $2 increase on their monthly bill. 1985, the charge will increase to $3. The next year, a $4 access fee will be charged. Businesses will pay a flat $6 every year. The Oklahoma Corporation Commission is opposed to the fee and are supporting Oklahoma lawmakers' efforts to postpone the program.
Now, Senate Bill 1660 would postpone the effective date of the access charges for 2 years. And I think that makes good sense because divestiture is a new experience for all of us. And we need the time to look at alternatives, to try to retain the concept of universal service in this country.
Townsend and the other commissioners believe the rate increase will be especially hard on those relying on fixed incomes. If the FCC plan is put into effect, by 1986, it could mean nearly a 50% increase in some current basic residential phone rates in rural Oklahoma. But 1984 elections could have a bearing on how the issue is decided. With political aspirations on the line, Townsend feels chances of a compromise are good. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
It would raise basic rates and make long...
Over the year and the presidents over the years, the opportunity to go.
We know of your affiliation with the Air Police, except everybody here a good 1984. This time I'd like to...
But we reduced the cost of state government by about $90 million last year. We're carving out $150 million this year. And unless we do something else, we'll have to carve out $250 million starting July 1st
of this year. But we must reform, we must change, not change for change's sake. But even after we reduce, and even after we reform, we have to ask ourselves, shouldn't there still be adequate revenue? I suggest to you that there should be.
Because the vehicle was already in place with the Department of Corrections to do this. This is something that they're interested in as well, and I imagine that they'll be trying to get Tulsa involved in some. We are utilizing prisoners who have been screened, and we don't have anybody in the program who's been a murderer or a rapist or been involved in child molestation. These people we are told by the Department of Corrections, these people are suitable for community service. We think it has some obvious benefits for the city because of our very tight budgets, and the use of the person power involved here will certainly help us.
Well, the amount of revenue that the plan will generate, Harry, will depend on how much of the Democratic Caucus with my membership and items of the plan which will involve the state. And then I will present my plan to the Democratic Caucus. I would think that it would be either late this week or early next week for their consideration. And we certainly want the input from the House members, and so before it's presented to the people of Oklahoma through the news media, we will present it to the Democratic Caucus.
You know, when a woman tells her husband that she's got menstrual cramps, well, there's a good chance she's not going to get the kind of sympathy that she really needs, simply because men have trouble relating to that subject. Most men have noticed that some women miss work occasionally because of menstrual cramps. Now, these women are having more trouble with their menstrual period or cramping, which we call dysmenorrhea, than do others. Dr. Patty Jane Ross says that the symptoms of menstrual cramps or dysmenorrhea vary widely among women.
And patients with mild dysmenorrhea are the patients that can function every day and go on about their work, but then there's that group of women who have severe dysmenorrhea, and there's no physical reason for it, no pathology there, except that every month they're in bed for 1 to 2 days of the month.
Now, when a woman says that she's having cramps, it means she's experiencing some degree of pain in the lower abdominal area or back. Now, we're not exactly sure why some women have more pain than others, but we think that it has some kind of relationship with the hormones called prostaglandins.
And probably these women have more prostaglandins around in their systems than people that do not have the cramps.
Women with severe cramps are usually treated with a drug that has an anti-prostaglandin agent in it. Now, if a woman suddenly develops severe cramping when it's been a relatively mild problem in the past, that could be a whole different problem. This sudden cramping could reflect an entirely new disease process. That woman should see a doctor immediately. Now, next time we'll talk about another thing men ought to know something about: hysterectomy. I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, it's perfectly understandable that a lot of folks, men in particular, do not know what the word hysterectomy means. Well, very simply, it's a surgical removal of the uterus or womb. Dr. Patty Ross says that the most common reason for having a hysterectomy is the development of tumors in the uterus or womb.
The uterus develops what we call fibroid tumors, and the fibroids grow and therefore increase the overall size of the uterus. And as the uterus grows in size, it begins to cause pain and other problems in the pelvis.
Women between the ages of 35 and 45 are in the group most likely to have fibroid tumors. Now, some women go for years without knowing that they have a fibroid. And a fibroid may range in size from that of a pea to a grapefruit. And occasionally, though rarely, they become malignant. Now, if your wife, mother, or loved one has to have a hysterectomy, remember, that's big-time surgery. The recovery will be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. They need a lot of support and a lot of caring.
I think some women have some mood changes after they have a hysterectomy.
Now, it really shouldn't be surprising that some women get really depressed after they have a hysterectomy. They've lost their fertility. That's important. They also may think they're getting old, though that may not be true at all. They need a lot of support from the men in their lives. I'm Dr. Red Duke.